Okay, what follows is what I think of as being a brag, and but I think I'm entitled to it, so I'll brag. The church or churches of Scientology in the United States started out having tax-exempt status, but because of, shall we say, Ron's refusal to follow the necessary steps when you get what is called in the United States 501c3 status, which is a tax-exempt organization. You have certain rules that you have to follow, including reporting whatever you collect in donations and charitable gifts, and in other words, your books, your accounting for once a year you have to present that information to the Internal Revenue Service, and you can't do certain things as a tax-exempt organization. You cannot start doing things for profit. The things you do all have to be, if it's an educational organization, they all have to be devoted to education. If it's a religious organization, the things you do have to fall under the effects of being charitable and helpful and assisting other people, as a religion is supposed to do. So that wasn't followed very well by Ron and his organization, and so the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, took away the tax-exempt status of the Church of Scientology in the United States, which created quite a problem then, because people couldn't make donations, and if they got services and paid for them, it was looking at being profit, and they couldn't take tax deductions, and it was just a real mess, and it was going on and on and on. So, moving the clock ahead to the year 1966-67, I got fed up with the church and the IRS, because the game went on and on and on, and the church didn't have tax-exempt status, and the IRS wouldn't give it to them, and the church wouldn't do the steps that you have to do to have tax-exempt status, and so it went on, and it was making trouble for people who should have been able to take a tax deduction and couldn't. So, being a junior grade OT, I decided that I was going to bypass Ron and the Church of Scientology and the church's legal people and get the status, tax-exempt status, back for the church. And then I could have a hero's medal. So at that time, the head of the Internal Revenue Service, and you can check this out, was a guy by the name of Sheldon Cohn, a nice Jewish boy. But he was the head of the Internal Revenue Service for the United States of America. And because I was a nice Jewish boy myself, I wrote Mr. Cohn a letter reminding him about what it was like to be a Jew in the 20th century world and earlier. The history of the Jews and the different things that have occurred in different lands at different times, and how every so often there might be a little bit of persecution that was considered a good idea that the Jews wouldn't be subject to. And so I said, now here I am, my religion is a thing called Scientology. I'm used to being persecuted as a Jew in the 20th century in the United States. But here I am, I've changed religion. I'm now a Scientologist and I'm a minister of a church, and it doesn't have its tax-exempt status. And I feel that this church, the Church of Scientology, should have its tax-exempt status, and it should cease to be treated as though it was Jewish and persecuted. It shouldn't be. The FDA and the IRS and the federal marshals should stop. I don't like it. And it keys in the feeling of being a Jew running around in Germany looking over my shoulder to see if I'm going to get caught and end up as a roasted Jew after I'm gassed. And I'm not interested in having that fate that so many of my older friends and relatives in Europe experienced. So what do you say? You want me to come to Washington, to your office, and show you how there are other organizations like the Church of Christian Science and the 12th Day Adventists and all these different who have their tax-exempt status, who are doing things that are not Hebrew, or Christian, Protestant, or Catholic, or Islamic, and they have tax-exempt status. They take in money, they own property, they charge for their services. Nobody's taking away their tax-exempt status, and I want the tax-exempt status for my church back. It's screwing me up personally and my church. Get it? Well, to my surprise and amazement, Mr. Cohn writes me back a very nice letter addressing me as Reverend Spickler and says if I'll be patient with him, he will look into the matter and see what happened and get back to me. So I'm thinking, maybe I'll never hear from him again. But a few weeks later, he writes back to me and has all the information as to why the church lost its tax-exempt status. And it's because L. Ron Hubbard and the people under him refused to abide by the rules of tax-exempt organizations that are founded as religious educational organizations. In order to keep your tax-exempt status, you may not take personal profit from your organization. You might say, well, I'm taking $1,000 because I want to buy a boat or something. No. Or a house. No. You can take a reasonable allowance for the minister or the head of the church place to live, but it should be in accordance with the reality of the monies of your church. You're not 2,000 years old like the Catholic Church where people give millions, hundreds of millions every year. So if the Pope spends money for a jet, it's okay. You're a little group now, and you can't be taking big money for personal profit. Get it? It's got to be very modest and in keeping with the size of your group. In 100 years, take big money. Or 50 years, but not right now. And we can't get Hubbard and his accounting department to send their books in for the yearly audit, which is every other tax-exempt, maybe not the big churches, but have to conform to these rules. That's all there is to it. And then as time goes by, you can more and more invest in your buildings and in your salaries and in the things. But you mustn't give the impression you're doing this for personal profit or gain. And that's what happened, both in Phoenix and in Washington. So, you want to get it back again? You have to get Hubbard and Company to agree. Okay. So I wrote him back and I said, Dear Mr. Cohn, thank you very much. I know that this can be accomplished, and I want something more than just telling Hubbard and the church what they have to do. I want to know what the IRS is going to do. And if that isn't forthcoming, I'm going to bring a camp cot to Washington, D.C., and bring it to your office, and I'm going to sleep on it until I get satisfaction. Because I want the IRS to help the Church of Scientology to get their status back. At the moment, the church and the IRS are like, and I'm in the middle. And That's got to stop, because the IRS is there to serve the people of the United States and their religions. Okay? And they need to keep those religions in mind. But I need the IRS to contact the Church of Scientology and say, look, we'd like you to get your tax-exempt status back, and it can be done easily. Well, he said, all right, don't come to Washington, and don't sleep outside my door. You'll hear from me shortly. Shortly, I get a letter from Sheldon Cohen, Commissioner of the IRS, saying, I'm going to have a gentleman who is the head for the IRS of all tax-exempt organizations east of the Mississippi, for the whole eastern United States, come to see you, and I want you to lay out for him everything that it's going to take to get this thing straightened out. And he says, this letter has gone to him, that's his orders, and here it is to you. You'll be seeing him soon.